Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the Art Table again today. If you've never heard of it, SBS Corner is a part of pretty much every volume of One Piece. What it boils down to is the author, Eiichiro Oda, taking questions from the audience. Pretty much any question at all is viable. It can be about how he draws characters, it can be about why he did something in the story, it can be about why there's certain continuity errors, or how far Luffy can stretch his arms. Literally anything you can think of has been asked. But more importantly, anything you can think of pretty much has been answered. And not by a stranger or an editor, by Oda himself. This is, I think, a major part of One Piece's success. Not the question and answers themselves, but the willingness of Oda to go out and do this. Furthermore, the eagerness with which he seems to do it, volume after volume after volume, is truly remarkable. As of this recording, there are 107 published volumes of One Piece. The exact number of questions that are answered in any given volume varies, depending on how long the answer needs to be and whether Oda draws a quick sketch to go along with them. One volume may have as few as 5 or 6 questions, others may have as many as 20. Assuming an average between 10 and 12 questions apiece, over the course of 107 volumes, that's well more than 1,100 questions answered. But it's not the simple exchange of information that tells us something about One Piece's success. Fundamentally, the reason One Piece is so successful beyond the author's grasp of storytelling, and the fact that it is published in a very popular magazine, is how much Oda cares about the story, about the characters, and about his world. People like myself, who have been reading One Piece for over 20 years, have so much affection for the story because Oda also has a great love for the story. His passion for the story, his ability to talk about it non-stop, his continual crafting of it for years and years on end, all working towards a single goal he set for himself decades ago, is an inescapable part of what has made One Piece the phenomenon it is. Stan Lee is widely considered the godfather of American comic books. While there were a lot of people who have made a big impact on the comic scene, and while Superman was created years before he took up the comic pen himself, Stan Lee was a constant hype man for the work done at Marvel. Yes, that was a little bit self-serving, and yes, Stan Lee often took credit for things that were largely the work of other people. I'm not here to deny those things. But Stan Lee had the capacity to make himself the face of American comics, and he was able to bring a passion to that role that very few comic artists can display in a way that draws in others. I'm not saying that someone like Jack Kirby had no passion for comics, just that he didn't have the ability to draw other people in, to share that passion with others in any way other than by drawing. Which is, of course, the fundamental part of comics, but that's not exactly what we're talking about right now. With no Stan Lee as a hype man, he didn't really do that well. We know this because he worked for DC for some time before his death, and the stuff that he created there, while very interesting, things like Apocalypse and New Genesis, Darkseid and the New Gods, these characters don't really have a whole lot of impact outside of the little niche that he carved for himself. There's nothing there on the level of Silver Surfer or X-Men or the Avengers or Thor. While Stan Lee never really wanted to be a comic writer, he was most interested in novels and movies, and he did eventually make his mark on the movies, as we all know. His passion was able to draw in many talented writers and artists, and ultimately change the way the medium thought about itself, and brought a new company to prominence in the industry. Recently, I watched a video by Mike Partaika, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, talking about the announcement of Horseman at MegaCon by the Rippaverse. This announcement made Mike worried. Apparently, Eric July recently did a stream where he asked his audience what kind of genres they wanted to see from the Rippaverse, and that worried Mike because it made him feel like Eric July did not have a plan for the Rippaverse going forward. Frankly, that wouldn't surprise me. That Eric had no plan, not that it would worry Mike. My biggest problem with Eric July's sense of writing has always been that he's very bad at managing stakes and expectations, and I thought that Chuck Dixon's ability to do that in Alpha Core was one of the things that made the book a marked improvement compared to the Isom books. An inability to manage expectations, consequences for actions, follow through on character or plot threads, this is one of the major failings a lot of amateur pantser writers have to overcome. It's not baked into the writing style, it's just something you have to watch out for, and when you're just starting to write in that style, you may not be used to it yet. And I see a lot of that in the way Eric writes. That's not a condemnation exactly. He is an amateur writer. He just has to learn to get past that point. And frankly, when you back any of these projects by these independent guys, you kind of have to expect amateur quality product for at least a year or so, in my opinion. Now, personally, I think July is worried about this because he's seen a significant sales drop-off over the first 3 books in his line. That really shouldn't have surprised him. That is the general arc for these kinds of projects. He's not going to have the kind of sustained sales figures of a company that's been around for 50 or 60 years on his first year of work. Most first-time creators see a 50% fall-off after their first crowdfund project. And then over their next 2 or 3, they see another 50% fall off as their audience realizes they're not quite getting what they expected, or they're not getting what they wanted at the level they wanted, and they move on to greener pastures. Ideally, as Eric July stabilizes his production process, as he starts to release more product on a regular basis, he can start building that audience back up. But he was never going to have multi-million-dollar crowdfunding campaigns time after time after time, with no dip in the middle. I haven't seen anyone pull that off. Asking around for other genres that he might be able to write in, or hire writers for, in order to draw in more eyes is not going to solve that problem. Honestly, what he needs to do to solve that problem is what he's already doing. Continue to promote himself, his product, go to conventions, get the word out, get eyes that haven't seen his product yet on his product. Every indie person, every webcomic creator, every struggling artist who eventually succeeds follows this basic pattern. And admittedly, most of the people who follow this pattern still fail. Failure is not outside the possibility, even for the Rippaverse, even on the proven path. Making your living by storytelling is just really hard. But what would make it easier is to have a little more passion to share with the audience. And not necessarily passion for the company, for the brand. And this is my big problem with the way the Rippaverse has marketed itself so far. Eric July and many of the people who have promoted him have a great deal of passion about being independent creators, about being separate from the systems of the Hollywood studios or the big comic publishers, or whatever else you want to talk about. That's all well and good. That's even necessary if you are going to strike out on your own. What they don't have is passion about their story, or if they do have it, they refuse to share it. This is another mark of an amateur. Far too many people out there are worried that the idea they have for a story will be quote-unquote stolen. First of all, forget about that. It's not possible. Stories are not stolen as ideas. They are stolen as completed works. If you and someone else both have the same idea for a story, and then you go out and you write that idea into a story, you're going to have 2 different stories just because you have 2 different writers. That's the way it works. There's a whole lot more to go into there, but that's not actually the point of this video. The point of this video is that in order to bring your passion to your audience, you have to be willing to talk about your story, not the failings of someone else's story, not how your company is succeeding, not how you are going to market things or hyping up the thing that is coming. You have to talk about what is right now. The best, most obvious example of this is Eric July's flat refusal to talk about Isom's powers. Now, Eric says there are enough clues in his story for you to figure them out. And he's correct about that. I didn't do it. Full disclosure, again, it was Mike Partaika who explained them to me. The problem is, even with them explained to me, I don't really understand them. I don't know what the potentials of them are. I cannot have the kind of excited nerd talk about Isem's powers that I have about Monkey D. Luffy's powers, or Green Lantern's powers, or Superman's powers. The details are very hard to parse. We don't have a lot of context for them yet. And volumes of Isem are coming out very slowly. We've only seen them operating under two sets of circumstances. It's very hard to think about them and extrapolate from that. It's very hard to have the kind of impassioned discussions that comic book fans really love to have about their favorite characters when you have so little information about them and how they work. If Eric July really had a deep and burning passion for this character, his powers, all the cool things they could do, all the cool things we're going to see them do, he would not be afraid of questions about them. He would be eager to gush about them, like Stan Lee, like Eiichiro Oda. Yet he doesn't. And that creates a passion deficit. There were a lot of people who were really excited about the Rippaverse at first. They were overflowing with passion about it. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to theory cast about it. They were eager to see what came next. But Eric July did not match that passion. I don't know if it was that kind of amateur nerves that prevented him from talking about the ideas he already had. I don't know if he just wasn't that passionate about his ideas. I don't know if he wanted people to have the thrill of discovery as they discovered each piece he had carefully put in place, or if he didn't have any pieces at all to put down. But whatever it is, announcing new titles and trying to find other genres that the audience is very passionate about is not going to fix the deficit. July needs to bring some passion to the table himself. He doesn't have to answer 20 questions a volume, but he's got to find something, or he may just be another comic creator who never sees audience growth again. But that's just my thinking. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.